There's been much speculation about which road projects will be affected by the government's announcement that capital works expenditure will be cut. Roads Minister Wal Murray has said no new road projects will be started, with funds being directed towards completing existing works and road maintenance. However, according to the member for Waratah, John Price, Highway 23, which is designed to remove traffic from the residential streets of Jesmond and Shortland, is one local project which will suffer. Although the highway is almost complete, Mr Price claims the RTA plans to defer the finishing date for 12 months.
I've got the distinct impression that the government's cutback in road funding generally to the north will mean that the end of State Highway 23 is to just proceed extremely slowly. In other words, the design only will be done.
By rights, Newcastle Council should now be working on the final stage of the project, building a roundabout at the intersection of Newcastle Road and the new highway. But that's not the case, and according to City Engineer Doug Chapman, Council has been told to defer its involvement until at least the beginning of next year. The RTA says it cannot confirm how long work on this road will be delayed for until the August state budget is released. So until then, this remains the road to nowhere.
To be faced with the prospect of no way to get on or off the highway for yet another 6 to 12 months is just too much.
Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The buses rolled into the depot this morning, bringing the system to a halt for the second time in 3 weeks. The drivers rejected State Transit's comprehensive new medical assessment, saying it pries into personal lives.
We don't see why we should be subjected to something that is over and above every other bus driver in New South Wales's requirements.
The union has given to every member a copy of this Roads and Traffic Authority medical assessment to take to their own doctors. The union says that if their members can pass this exam, then they're fit enough to drive a bus. But State Transit says that's still not satisfactory.
We will only accept the examination that is designed for that purpose, and that is the State Transit periodical medical examination.
Despite management's plea that for its drivers, the RTA medical is unacceptable, Dave Winwood asserts the union will be putting the assessments on State Transit's table on August the 16th, the deadline for the return of State Transit's own assessments.
They seem hell-bent on proceeding along this course, contrary to all the advice that we can give them from professional people. I hope we're not going to have a confrontation, but it looks like we're going to.
Newcastle buses were operating again this afternoon, but if State Transit insists that the drivers submit to the tougher assessment, the union will be calling for an all-out strike. Meanwhile, tougher licensing measures in another transport sector. To stay on the road, all taxi drivers in Newcastle and Lake Macquarie have to be re-screened and in some cases retested. Under the old licensing system, applicants had to satisfy only driving and locality knowledge requirements. This has been extended to include public relations, stress management and a training program for new drivers. The General Manager of the Newcastle Taxi Services Cooperative, Jeff Rich, says the tougher licensing requirements will mean a better service.
Well, the public are going to love it, I think. They can't lose. The competent, the good drivers, the fair income drivers are going to welcome it as well. It's the drivers who haven't performed too well in the past and have caused us some problems. I don't think they're going to be too keen on it at all.
The Green Hills Veterinary Hospital offers a VIP, or very important pet service to its patients, from cats to cattle. Dick Gelderman has been a vet in the area for 14 years and after extensive studies of animal hospitals in America and Australia has put together a business he says is the shape of things to come for animal care.
At the moment I think it's the best design and the most modern purpose-built hospital in Australia that I know of anyway.
5 resident vets and 2 nurses will staff the hospital's consulting rooms, pharmacy, pathology lab and operating theatre, equipped with an ultrasound scanner and X-ray. There are isolation wards and spacious holding areas, along with a large bay for equine examinations. The hospital has a resident cat named Timothy and a dog called Bazza. The pair make regular appearances at local schools for pet care classes. It's hoped the hospital will attract experts in animal medicine.
We intend to get specialists to come up visiting on a regular fortnightly or monthly basis, and some of them indicated that they're quite happy to do that to save people travelling to Sydney.
Brigades were called to the isolated bush retreat about 15 kilometres north of Dungog at 11 o'clock last night. Dungog's town and bushfire brigades were on the scene within 20 minutes where they faced an inferno. It was 3 hours before they could control the blaze and approach the ruins of the 14-room timber homestead. Heat from the fire scorched surrounding trees and melted garden light globes like toffee. Brigade Captain Wayne Redmond says flames from the building illuminated the sky.
We could see the glow from about 10-12 k's down the road. We knew what we were in for then.
Neighbours were the first to go to the rescue of the 40 residents.
The whole building was ablaze and there was really nothing we could do. My husband actually went into a part of the building that was filled with smoke but not alight and managed to get 5 people out.
In the confusion of the evacuation, several residents were reported running back into the building to rescue friends from the inferno. Locals did what they could to help survivors, setting up a shelter and makeshift first aid station in a nearby home.
Well, we're taking them across the road to the next door neighbours and wrapping them in blankets and making them cups of tea and so forth.
What kind of condition were they in?
Well, there were a couple of them pretty badly hurt, I'd say, by a flying glass. A window exploded. But and quite a lot of them were very black from smoke.
Fire investigators began the grim task of locating bodies in the smouldering embers early this morning. All 12 victims were located, most in their beds, their remains indicated by markers. There were 28 survivors. 8 were admitted to Dungog Hospital suffering burns and smoke inhalation. The others were given emergency accommodation at the neighbouring daycare centre where a steady stream of relatives checked on their well-being. The men and women all suffer from degrees of mental impairment, mostly alcohol-related. The mountain retreat, which dates back to 1915, was a privately operated halfway house which offered an idyllic setting for rehabilitation. State Coroner Kevin Waller was flown to the scene aboard a police helicopter. In his term, Mr Waller has seen more than his share of mass tragedy, but he admitted being stunned by the death toll and the destruction.
The relatives will endeavour to be contacted, those who have relatives. Some of these people, of course, don't have them or they've lost touch with their relatives, but everything will be done to assist relatives in the situation. The grief counsellors at Glebe, of course, have been warned and they're be ready, willing and available to help anyone who needs assistance.
The victims' remains have been placed in numbered body bags and taken to Sydney for forensic tests. Police have already begun an intensive investigation into the cause of the fire, which they say has been hampered by the mental state of the residents. The inquiry will focus on the level of supervision the residents were receiving as well as the cause. It's understood that Mr Waller's inquiry could lead to dramatic changes in fire safety requirements for public buildings and a likely increase in the power of fire brigade officers to enforce safety precautions. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
These students from Whitebridge High School spent last week at Prudential Assurance head office. Their brief was to design a staff health fund as part of the Prudential Youth Achievement Award. After 5 days of research and planning, they came up with a comprehensive proposal which may even be used by the company.
It's a good two-way. They gain experience, we gain input from some smart young people in the community.
Well, it's different in the fact that you actually get treated as part of the company, and there was a lot of help from others, and we actually had to prepare a campaign.
And today, the trio was announced the Hunter Region winners over 6 other high school groups, each team of 3 with their own projects on topics from investment to marketing. The Whitebridge team collected a $1,000 cheque and a plaque for their school library.
This is very important for us in our school. We really didn't expect this, so we're very happy and pleased.
It's been a while between drinks for the Knights, and yesterday they took all their frustrations out on the luckless Rabbitohs. There wasn't a passenger in the team, and one of the stars of the day was Tony Kemp. Moved to 5'8" to partner new half Michael Hagan, Kemp worked wonders and was also rewarded with a 4-pointer.
I've made it well known that 5'8", I've always wanted to play 5'8", and I had to sit and wait my time, and the time came yesterday and I got my chance and took both hands on the reins and took it, I suppose.
Playing a position that is pretty familiar to him, Michael Hagan dictated play all day, and his brilliant hands were responsible for many attacking raids.
I was a bit scratchy around the scrum base a few times, and I dropped one or knocked one on that Dave Mullane wasn't too happy about. If looks could kill, I'd be dead. But we got our act together after that point, and we combined pretty well.
But most accolades were showered on debutant Brad Godden. Thrust into the full-back's position, the boy from Blackhill answered the call in the best possible way.
Well, I think in my 4 years here, I think that's as exciting a debut as we've seen at the Knights, and I've left a message for Bradley to ring me this morning here. I don't know exactly how he is just yet.
With a win in all 3 grades and harmony throughout the club, there's a huge optimism for the remainder of the year.
We have to take each week as it comes, and that's the beauty of rugby league. You've got to prepare yourself as well as you can every week, and I'm sure David will start again tonight for next week's performance against Eastern Suburbs.
The cathedral has a long historical association with education in the Hunter.
As long ago as 1816, a small group of children met in the vestry in a building that was on this site called Christ Church.
This week marks the year of the school, and according to the Assistant Director General of School Education, Alan Baird, the focus is on individual schools and their increasing autonomy within the education system. Watching the proceedings with interest were children from Tanagura in Japan, who were, in turn, watched closely by a Japanese TV crew producing a documentary on their visit to Australia. With the week declared officially open, the cathedral filled with the sound of young voices. And then an odd sight in the aisles of the Grand Church. There was also a performance by the Nimbinbar Aboriginal dancers from Gateshead High School. Education Week will continue with a series of displays and performances across the region.
In the shadow of the stacks of the Vales Point Power Station, about 400 Elcom workers met to consider their next move in what they see as a fight to save their future. As part of its push to be more efficient, Elcom is looking at dividing its operations into 5 units. But the State Labor Council and the unions want Elcom left alone, saying a carve-up won't benefit their members or the public. The workers voted unanimously to reject the dividing up of Elcom's operations. Also of concern to the meeting, the prospect of another 250 jobs to be shed from the Lake Munmora, Araring and Vales Point power stations.
I think we've got to a position now of people within the industry who have saw what is happening outside. There are no job alternatives outside, particularly in this region. And of course, people are not going to take large sums of money, which are going to be whittled away very quickly with no opportunity to get further employment.
The power stations unions will be taking part in a rally in Newcastle next Wednesday and in Sydney a week later, protesting the Greiner government's cuts in the public sector. But some of those attending today's meeting aren't content to stop at attending rallies. They want an all-out strike.
But every government employee that's being put in this position, stop work or do something on the same day, so it's bus drivers, the whole lot, so it's uniform.
With uncertainty as to what's in store for Elcom and their jobs, the workers say their morale has been battered.
It's like just walking up a coal stack there. Like it gets harder and harder each time, each step you take.
I mean, what morale? There's no morale at all.
A meeting of Hunter Valley Power Station's workers is planned for tomorrow at Liddell. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
The Hi-Ho was carrying 11 people from the Tea Gardens Hotel to Corrie Island on January 13 last year when it sank after hitting an oyster rack sometime after 11 p.m. Most passengers swam to safety or were picked up by the Nelson Bay Police launch Cess Abbott, but one woman, Leslie Patricia Waddell, drowned during the drama. The trial of the Hi-Ho's skipper, Brian Marshall, resumed today, with more of the 10 survivors giving accounts of the events of that night. Several told of hitting a bump in the water, then realising that the vessel was sinking. At one stage, presiding Judge Freeman suggested that the jury and counsel should personally inspect the vessel, where it remains impounded at Newcastle Police Station. Judge Freeman said he was permitting the jury to view the boat only so they could understand the evidence being given by various witnesses. He warned them against becoming detectives and forming their own ideas about the Hi-Ho's last minutes afloat. Day 2 of the trial concluded at about 3:30 this afternoon and will resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Mr Marshall was granted continuing bail on the condition that he went straight to his home address at Nelson Bay and remained there until returning to Newcastle District Court when the hearing resumes. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
This is the line that now carries coal from the Redhead Colliery to the BHP. Member for Charlestown Richard Face says the privately owned line is in bad shape and he fears traffic will be forced off the tracks and onto the roads, up to 80 truck movements a day.
My view is that it ought to be on the rail, not on trucks, increasing the problems. I've got enough troubles here in Charlestown with the traffic as it is, with no bypass and the like.
State Rail admits the line has deteriorated but says it is still safe. According to Newcastle Council, it has received a verbal request from BHP to issue an approved route for the haulage of 2,000 tonnes of coal per day by road. BHP says it was simply making inquiries and no formal approaches have been made. State Rail and BHP are meeting with the line's owners to try to save the track and in turn keep local roads for motorists. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The Falcons were shooting at will during practice today, and with the game against Illawarra drawing closer, it was probably a wise move.
I anticipate that they will be doing the running game that they've been doing over the last 2 weeks. And in both occasions, they've scored over 150 points. So they're putting points up on the board, and we're going to have to be able to contend with that.
The Melbourne Tigers had no trouble coping. In fact, they rewrote the record books in a 186 to 158 win. Still, there's been no change in the Hawks' tactics. In fact, they racked up 151 points in beating an all-star American college team last week.
We're going to go out the rest of the year and really try to run and really try to create an atmosphere that's never been seen before in the NBL.
But the Falcons will be inspired as well. Off-guard Michael Johnson will play his 250th game for the club on Saturday night. And although he's typically low-key, the quietly spoken sharpshooter deserves a memorable evening.
It is a milestone, but this is just another game. And it's just important to us that we get a win, so I won't be thinking about how many games I've played. It's just this Saturday night.
Bruce McKenzie, NBN News.
Hard work and determination got Stuart Collins a position in the Aussie side, but it won't pay his bills. The 17-year-old prop who plays under-18s with Newcastle's western suburbs needs $5,000 to tour Great Britain in November. Today, some of that pain was eased with a $2,000 donation from the Excalibur Club, a group of business and sports people who raise money for the Newcastle Knights. Rugby league legend Frank Hyde and Stuart Collins' personal hero Mark Sargent gave some tips for the tour, and beyond that, advice for Stuart's footballing future.
I'm an offloading front row forward. Don't mind the hard stuff. Really just like that.
So you get in there and have a go if you have to?
Yep.
It looks like he'd make a good foil for Sarge in the front row. Stuart says he is talking contracts with the Knights. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Wallsend nurses were making a real fashion statement today. They're prepared to fight for their hospital and their patients. Many of the sick will be transferred to other hospitals throughout the region if the closure goes ahead as planned at the end of the month. After inspecting the replacement wards yesterday, the nurses are horrified.
They're substandard, they're still earthquake damaged, they're dirty, there's no piped air, no piped oxygen for our medical patients.
Staff at Wallsend believe the facilities there are far superior to most available elsewhere in the Hunter. They claim the patients will suffer for the government's bungling.
Mr Griner, what he says, I don't care about. He obviously doesn't care about patients, he doesn't care about families, he doesn't care about how people have to travel. They're the ones we're concerned about, and they're the ones we're fighting for, patients.
But the Premier remains determined to close the hospital.
The logic of it is overwhelming. You can't in 1991 have three hospitals within a spitting distance of each other and expect that situation to continue. It's simply unrealistic.
Hospital administrators are now resigned to the closure but sympathetic towards a shell-shocked staff.
It takes time for all grief to resolve, and I think the time will come when the grief is resolved that they will accept it, but they cannot at this early stage accept it.
Bruce McKenzie, NBN News.
Smith's body was spotted floating in Throsby Creek around midday yesterday. He had severe head injuries and police immediately launched an investigation, treating the death as suspicious. They had hoped to have the results of a post-mortem examination this afternoon to confirm their fears, but they are still waiting. However, inquiries at the St Vincent de Paul hostel at Wickham, where Smith was living, revealed a number of items that he should have been carrying were not on the body. These included a wallet, a Walkman with headphones and a dark-coloured vinyl jacket. The victim had been living at the men's hostel in Hannell Street since moving from Wollongong earlier this year. The last time Supervisor Dennis Maybe saw him was at 5 o'clock on Tuesday.
We last saw Stephen Tuesday afternoon. He'd been in a bit of a ruckus with one of the other blokes here, and as a disciplinary measure, both of them were put outside. After about half an hour, Stephen was allowed back in. The afternoon passed and he wanted to go out, and that's his right, so we let him out. And he didn't turn up at all later on Tuesday night, which would normally be his form.
According to Mr Maybe, Stephen Smith was a friendly person who would not have harmed anyone.
The the best word to describe Stephen is harmless. He's 5 and a bit foot, about 7 stone ringing wet. He's an eccentric sort of a character, but he wouldn't harm a fly.
Police have not ruled out a connection between his death and the discovery of 2 boats in the area which had been broken into. One was splattered with blood. However, they say this is playing a small part in their overall investigation. Jodie McKay, NBN News.